In the last episode of My Hero Academia, we watched as Vigilante Deku began his battle against Lady Nagant. And this is a character that's definitely massively beloved, and a lot of people really connected with this character in the short time that they appeared in the series, or at least the short time that she appeared over this arc. But last week, the battle began with us getting some information on Lady Nagant about how she was this amazing hero at sniping thanks to Snipe's interview on TV, and Deku, even with all the amazing quirks that he has and all the abilities that he's picked up over this arc and over the series, has a lot of trouble with getting away from this top hero. But before we pick back up on Deku and Lady Nagant, we have to see what's going on with All Might, as last episode we left All Might dealing with a weird projectile that sent his car spinning out of control. Here in this episode we're going to see exactly what happened with that, where it seems like Lady Nagant, or All for One, paid some villains to go after All Might in his vehicle to pretty much keep him away from Deku and isolate Deku so that Deku could have this battle against Nagant. And I really want to think that this was Lady Nagant who sent these villains after All Might, because I feel like if it was All for One, he would have sent anyone more capable, right? There had to be a villain or an assassin that he could have sent after All Might specifically, considering their grudge, but maybe there was no one on hand, or this is just who Nagant could find on short notice. Either way, they throw some thunder spears at All Might and take him out of his car, this awesome Hercules vehicle that he has in the manga, and from there we see All Might actually start to intimidate these people who think that they're going to take down the ex-number-1 hero. But All Might kind of taps into like his inner stain, I guess, and scares the crap out of these two villains, showing that he still does have that heroic spirit and that heroic fierceness inside, and despite him not having his powers anymore, or really not being able to enter muscle form for more than just like a second or so, he's still definitely someone to be completely fearful of when you think of everything that that man's done and all the adversity that he's already overcome. So All Might manages to scare away these villains, and then we cut back over to Deku versus Lady Nagant, where we see that Deku is trying to do his absolute best to avoid Lady Nagant's projectiles. He dips and dodges between buildings, and he starts using his smoke screen to try to get as much effective cover as he can, but eventually he's warned by the smoke user, and much like he did during the muscular fight, that Deku has used too much smoke. He's already kind of put himself in a situation where if he gets out of that smoke, he's going to be easy pickings for Lady Nagant, who is now using the airwalk quirk that we saw her using at the end of the last episode to pretty much just have 100% effective range on Deku, because she can be anywhere over this little city that they're fighting in, and she has a range of like 3,000 meters or something like that. So with her just floating over his head in this situation where she's so far above him using smokescreen isn't really all that helpful. But this is where Deku chimes in, letting the quirk user for smoke know that he actually has an idea here, and here's where we're going to get a funny little scene in the anime with the One for All holder showing a little bit of personality, where N realizes exactly what it is that Deku's trying to do, and the serious third quirk user comes out and he's like, hey, I wouldn't recommend that. But what is it exactly that Deku's going to be attempting here? Well, we know that Deku recently did win over the last two quirk users of One for All, and though he won't be using the final quirk of One for All, the second quirk, in this episode, we will be seeing Deku bust out the third quirk user's quirk, the last quirk that we're going to see Deku unlock during My Hero Academia Season 6. So it's definitely a very, very important one, and Fajin, the name of the quirk that he's going to be unlocking, is very, very special, because especially in the way that the anime is showing it, it's kind of like Deku's own version of Kaioken, but for specific parts of his body, depending on how much energy he builds up, right? Technically, he could build it up all over his body everywhere, but it's much easier to build it up on specific locations. So Deku's going to be trying to build up this strange One for All Fajin energy, and one difference that we've already seen between the anime and the manga is that in the anime, Fajin is actually represented by glowing energy coming through Deku's limb. So it looks like literally his limb turns into some sort of like lightsaber texture, versus how it is in the manga, where it kind of looks like cloudy sort of energy waves coming from Deku's legs, right? Kind of wrapping around his legs or his arms or whatever body part he's using the quirk on, looking more like Aries kind of rewind energy than anything like just a glowing body part. But we know that the anime does take its liberties with some of the ways that some quirks look. Even One for All Full Cowling looks different than it does in the manga, since Deku has like a sort of texture, right, going all throughout his body, and in the anime for a while they did that weird red X thing that they had on his face, which, you know, is just their way of showing that he's in this form, making it more noticeable than the manga's kind of just textured approach. Now, the main course of this episode is the extensive backstory for the ex-hero, the lovely Lady Nagant. And this is something that actually didn't get to be as long as it was supposed to be in the manga, because Horikoshi's editor at the time, one that everyone pretty much universally just dislikes, Taguchi, made him shorten this backstory that Horikoshi said himself could have lasted an entire volume. So we definitely don't get as much as I think we could have gotten, but it seems like Horikoshi did kind of give us a Spark Notes version of that long version of her backstory. Now, of course, we've been hearing over and over again that Lady Nagant used to be a hero, and this is where we learn everything about her past and her ties to the Hero Public Safety Commission. Lady Nagant is pretty much something like Hawks' mentor, right? So like, she's the last version of Hawks, and she's the person that Hawks is actually replacing in his role at the Hero Public Safety Commission. And if you know anything about how Hawks' job works as a hero, he was pretty much given free license to do anything as long as it benefited the Hero Society, and they would even send them on dark missions to do dark things, like taking down villains that weren't allowed to exist in society. And Nagant was a really dark precursor to that, having even worse missions and even more dangerous things. And in this episode, more than any before, we see that there definitely was a dark side to the Hero Society in the past, and people and characters like Lady Nagant are one of the things that really kept that darkness in the Hero Society afloat. There's a front and a back to the hero system, right? And both sides have to coexist for the hero system to exist at all. So characters like Lady Nagant had to take out threats that people weren't even allowed to know existed. And that's what led to her eventually looking at her own blood-stained hands when looking at her fans and realizing that this isn't the life that she wanted to live, as she tries to retire from the Hero Public Safety Commission, and they tell her that, look, that's not something that we really do here. If you want to retire, and before the president of the commission even says anything, Lady Nagant takes her fate into her own hands, or I guess her own arms, and handles everything herself, branding herself a criminal as she takes down the current leader of the Hero Public Safety Commission and being locked away into Tartarus until everything happens that lets her out via All for One. Now, because of this internally, we see that Lady Nagant actually does have a good heart. It's just frozen over after all the things that she's had to deal with. But in this episode, we're going to see Deku finally complete the Talk No Jutsu on Lady Nagant, but All for One actually has a plan here. And because of that, things aren't going to go Deku's way, even if he manages to try to win Lady Nagant over. But that's actually not going to be the cliffhanger for the episode, because we're going to see Lady Nagant falling out of the sky as Deku and Hawks try to catch her after her explosion. And while some sad piano music plays, All for One talks all sorts of trash about Lady Nagant and how she never should have tried to turn back to the heroes because her heart is so fickle. But the issue is, it seems like All for One is sort of miscalculated, because Lady Nagant actually survives the massive explosion, and that's likely because Lady Nagant's quirk does involve her using projectiles, like turning her arm into a rifle and kind of dealing with those sort of forces. So like Bakugo and other characters who are meant to deal with high forces of kinetic energy or other energy, I would imagine that's exactly what helped Lady Nagant survive this situation. Now, Lady Nagant warns Deku that there are still several assassins coming after him, and gives him the location of one of All for One's hideouts and says, "This is where I was supposed to take you." And Nagant telling this to Deku starts a domino effect that isolates him, ironically giving All for One what he wanted anyway. Now, Deku and the others rush to the location of All for One's hideout as Deku clenches his fist and prepares to meet the Demon King himself. And maybe this episode could leave us on a brutal cliffhanger involving All for One and Deku, but I think according to info on the episode, it'll end with Deku clenching his fist, which could either be before he enters the building or during the conversation inside. Either way, next week's episode, episode 22, is titled Friends, and it should cover up until the end of chapter 318 of the manga. And I think that's everything that we can expect from My Hero Academia Season 6 episode 21, and that has been my kind of pre-episode breakdown of everything that I believe we're going to see. So let's see how accurate we are. In a couple hours, the episode is going to be out, and if you're watching this after the episode comes out, let me know if you want me to do a proper review of the episode later in the day, and I'll probably get you guys handled with that. So this is Pineapple. I'll see you guys later. Check out my video on Naruto Storm Connections and or Naruto Storm 5, and yeah, peace.